Hi friends and new friends, Kimchi Chris here, and welcome to today's episode where we are going to take a look at one of the most controversial games in the Yakuza series. That's right, today we are going to delve into Yakuza 3. Now, if you're a fan of this franchise, and I'm going to assume you are because you clicked on this, you know that this is a game that is not universally loved like Zero or Kiwami 2 or Like a Dragon or something along those lines. This is a game that stirs up conversation, hence why we're here today. This is a game that a lot of people haven't even finished. They said it was too boring, it was too slow, the graphics weren't good, whatever it was, they dropped the thing. Now, there might be some nostalgia here, but spoiler alert, I think it's a pretty okay game, and this was my first Yakuza game that I ever played way back in the day on the PS3. That's right, I have the original PS3 version of it here, but most recently I replayed it on the PS4 Remastered collection that includes 3, 4, and 5, so it's very fresh in my mind. And after replaying it with the nostalgia goggles possibly on but possibly off, it really got me thinking, why do people hate this game so much? So I figured we'd break it down into the positives and the negatives. That's right, we're gonna look at 3 negatives and 3 positives. I'm gonna start with the negatives to get all the negativity out of the way. Get it out of your life because you don't need negativity in your life. But at the same time, maybe there's some valid concerns with this one. So let's kick off these negatives with the one that I think is brought up the absolute most, and that is the story / slow pacing. We're gonna put that into one category because the story is affected quite a bit by the slow pacing. Now, if you've played a Yakuza game before, you know they're pretty quick on their feet, but they're also not opposed to bringing you out of the action for large chunks of story that sometimes involve long conversations with lots of backtracking or possibly foreshadowing and just a lot of words in general. And since these games are always subtitled, they can seem a little bit longer-winded even at times. And this one has a very slow start, not for that reason, but because the beginning of the story basically has Kiryu trying to get out of his position in the Yakuza like he always seems to be before he gets dragged back in. Spoiler alert, like always happens, but he's basically trying to run an orphanage. Now, most of you probably know he was an orphan himself, so this really has cool meaning to it because it's important to him, and this really does seem like a place that, you know, he would end up if he didn't just keep falling into his old habits. But as a result, the beginning of this game is basically a dad simulator game. That's right, you're taking care of kids, you're listening to their problems, you're helping them solve the problems, you're disciplining them, you're dealing with all kinds of stuff. And if this is something that you're interested in, if you actually like kids or you like being a parent or something along those lines, or you just kind of want to see what it's like, this game won't really teach you what it's like, but it gives you an idea of that type of lifestyle at least. And it's very different. It's a very different start than any other game in the franchise, and that has turned a lot of people off through the years. Mind you, when it gets going, it really gets going into full Yakuza mode, and there's action, and there's adventure, and there's excitement. And then you have to go solve problems for kids again. That's right, the pacing is a little bit janky. I will admit that as a fan of this game because it just doesn't make sense at all times. I get that they're really trying to show you that Kiryu's life is different now, but it's weird. It's kind of a bizarre pacing on the story, I will admit. Basically, the summary is Kiryu takes care of kids, then he gets back into the Yakuza ways. The end. That's the story. But at the same time, there's just some weird pacing there, but there's also some great character development for Kiryu because I don't want to get into spoilers, but there's a new character in this game that he really connects with, and unfortunately, because it's Yakuza, things happen to that character, but it's got some positives in the story, but there's definitely some negatives, and I completely understand why someone that was new to this game might turn it off because it takes a while to get going. It takes a couple hours to really get going into the same style that these games are known for. In hindsight, it's surprising that I stuck with this as my first entry into the series, considering I was quite a bit younger and didn't really know what was ahead, but I had heard the games were awesome and I was willing to stick with it, and oh boy was I rewarded as a younger gamer, and I was just rewarded again when I replayed it, of course. And now it's time for negative number 2, the graphics. Now, even when you go back and watch an old IGN review of this game, they say the graphics look dated and aren't very good and are clunky, and people continue to talk about that to this day, but I don't know that I fall into that category. When you really look at the time period this came out, PS3, I don't think it looks too bad, really. It looks okay on modern monitors too, the remastered one at least. I don't know about the original PS3 because I didn't pop that in. Maybe I should for comparison, but I did not. But the remastered one for PS4, it looks fine. Looks perfectly fine, but a lot of people say the graphics are not very good, specifically because the characters are less expressive, something that they're very much known for in the more current generation of games in this series. But I weirdly think that adds to the charm that Kiryu kind of just looks like he needs to take a dump the entire time the game is running. No matter what's going on, he just looks agitated, angry, and flustered, which it's the classic Kiryu. It's great. I don't think the graphics are bad at all, but a lot of people don't like them. It is what it is. Moving on. Negative number 3, the combat. Oh boy, the combat is a big part of these games. It's kind of the meat and potatoes outside the story, and I got to admit, the combat is a little archaic. Now, back in the day, when I played this the first time, I don't remember really having that thought. If you've played the more current games and you're going back to this, you're gonna be spoiled and you're gonna think it kind of sucks. It's a lot more samey, and the AI, oh boy, there's a problem with that. They just gang up on you and destroy you no matter what. They really make it a challenging experience, and it's mostly when there's multiple characters on the screen. When you're fighting the bosses, ironically enough, it's not too bad because there's only one of them. Mind you, the bosses that have little friends with them, they're very hard, but they'll all attack you at once, and when you're just recovering from one smacking you, the next one smacks you as well. So it's not set up very well. It's not set up in your favor. It's difficult for all the wrong reasons, and I don't know what they did with this to make it this way. And to be fair, I've never played the original 1 and 2 that were on PS2, so I don't know if they were like this. I've only played the Kiwami remakes, but this combat is kind of rough. It wasn't fun. I didn't love getting into random encounters as much in this game as I did in some of the other ones I've played, but you get used to it, I guess, and it very much is a sign of the times, but the combat isn't great. That is definitely a huge drawback for this game. With all that negativity out of the way, let's get into the positivity. And the first thing we're gonna look at as a positive is the story. That's right, yes, it was the first thing on the list of negatives, but I like the story. I like seeing Kiryu interact with the kids. Sure, some of the kid missions and things you have to do with them could get a little bit tedious at times, but it was awesome seeing him as a dad, seeing him interact with these kids, seeing him make a difference. And then when it was time for Yakuza action, oh boy, did the old school Kiryu come out. He threw off the Hawaiian shirt, he put on the gray suit, and he was ready for battle. Now that doesn't mean that he didn't occasionally come back and hang out with the kids in the gray suit, but he was ready, and you knew he was ready. And the story that was for the more action-driven parts that were more traditional to the series, they're pretty good as well. Again, I don't want to get into too much spoiler territory here. I'm trying to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. I think I've done a pretty good job because I haven't really talked about a lot of details, but I think they're good too. The only complaint on that is there could have been more Majima in there because we all love Maji, but outside of that, I think the story is pretty good. So anyone that says it's bad, yeah, the pacing is a little bit weird, but otherwise, it's great. If you're a fan of this series, it's great. Is this a good one to start the series with? Probably not, but if you have a little versatility in your thoughts when it comes to Yakuza and just video games in general, I think you'll enjoy the story. Those negative people, they're wrong. They are wrong. And positive number 2, it would be the sub-stories. That's right, these are great in every game. You know how they are. You get into these crazy hijinks that are optional, but they definitely make the game. If you fly through all of them and don't do them, you're missing out, because what other game can you help a guy not jump off a bridge and kill himself, and then 3 seconds later help a family get ice cream because you knocked the ice cream out of their hands, so you got to go buy some more and take it across the street. Be very careful. Don't drop the ice cream. Don't drop the ice cream. That's what you've got to do in that mission. And if you succeed, then you helped a nice family get some ice cream. What's bad about that? But outside of that, the thing I really liked about the sub-stories in this game is that most of them were not too overblown. In some of the more recent ones, these sub-stories can take a really long time, and that's awesome because you're getting a lot of content, a lot of bang for your buck, but some of these could be solved within a minute or two of fighting some guys, bringing some ice cream to some kids, whatever it was, and then you were on your merry way. Of course, there were some that were more detail-oriented and definitely involved a lot more, but I like that there was a variety and there was a whole lot of them, and I didn't complete all of them. I think there's over like 100 in this game, but I love the sub-stories. They're awesome. The variety is just great in this game. You gotta check out the sub-stories when you play this one. It's gonna make the game about 1,000 times better for you. And then positive number 3 is the fact that even a bad Yakuza game is still a good game. That's right. Yakuza games are like Ramones records. They can't make a bad one. I don't care what anyone says. This might seem like a little bit of a cop-out as the third positive, but it's the truth. This, I will admit, is one of the weaker games in the franchise. Believe me, I love this game. It was my introduction to the series. The nostalgia goggles, they're on very thick. They can't come off, but I will admit that it's a little bit weaker between the pacing of the story, the graphics, and the battle system, but overall, it is still better than an average or even great game in other franchises, because this franchise doesn't know how to make a bad game. Sure, there's some things that are very similar in these games over and over, and people like to point that out that aren't huge into the fandom, but they know what their fans want and they give it to them, and honestly, that's what makes this game, as well as every other game in the franchise, a winner in my book. And with that said, the question remains, is Yakuza 3 a bad game? Well, I think I've answered that here. It's not. Don't listen to the haters. This is a good game. Now, obviously, everyone's open to having their own opinions. Some people might really dislike this one, and some people might rank it at the very top of their list. I haven't met a lot of those people, but there still might be a few out there. With all that being said, though, this is a well put together product. Sure, most people are going to agree Zero is better, or Like a Dragon is better, or the Judgment games are better, but this is a good game when you factor in when it came out, and how much energy and love and time was put into it, and just the overall aesthetic and how it moved the story forward. Just like all the Yakuza games, the story is very, very important, and this one's got one. It's got one. It's kind of slow moving in the beginning. I won't lie about that, but it's got a story nonetheless. But with all that being said, what do you guys think of this game? Do you think it's the worst game ever made? Do you think it's the greatest game ever made? Or are you somewhere in the middle, kind of like me? I think it's a very enjoyable game. I think anyone that's a fan of the franchise should check it out, but I don't think this should be your first installment in the series because it might turn you off. And thank you so much for watching this episode. If you're new around here, make sure to subscribe, turn on alerts, give the episode a thumbs up, all those things that every YouTuber ever has told you to do. My name is Kimchi Chris, and I will see each and every one of you on the next episode. Bye.